Hello, today I'm going to show you my Everyday Minerals makeup routine using mostly their products except for a couple of others. So what I would start with after I clean my face and moisturize it, I will start with concealer, and what I'm going to use is this fresh concealer from Everyday Minerals, and this comes in their concealer kit of hydrating concealers. It's basically the Aussie Perk Me Up, but it has an extra ingredient in it, vitamin E, I believe, that makes it kind of more creamy and more moisturizing for that under eye area that tends to be drier. So what I'm going to use is this little brush here for my concealer. It's Essence of Beauty, which I just bought at CVS, and I like using this because it's very small and it allows me to be more precise. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to just apply this under my eye. And I know it looks really scary because it's very light and pearly, even for someone as pale as myself. But do not worry, we're going to blend that in. And if your skin is kind of on the medium to light to medium side and is not that pale, you're afraid to use such a light concealer such as this, they have another one that is a mix of peach concealer and sunlight concealer, which is called Abbott's Perk Me Up, and it's kind of more of a peachy color. It's definitely not as light as this concealer here. It doesn't come in the hydrating kit, but you can just see it on their concealer page. So I applied that under my eyes. I blended it a little bit, but it still looks quite light. I don't know if you can see that. And my next concealing step, I'm going to use just this tiny little brush here from e.l.f. It's their $1 line, and I'm going to use my Everyday Minerals Golden Fair in semi-matte. And what I did here is, I don't want to say I pressed it because there's no actual pressing going on. I just mixed it with alcohol and it dried to this kind of hearted state, which is easier for me to just stick my brush into, but I will make another video on how I do this, how I make my concealer in this form. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to go over my blemishes with this. And the nice thing about using your foundation shade for concealer is that it'll be your perfect match, and you don't have to worry about it looking off in color. And so as I just apply this really quickly, I have kind of a lot of things to cover up, but as I'm doing it, I'm blending it with my finger here, or you can use the brush just to blend it out a little bit so you don't have just like a spot. Kind of go over all my little areas here, and they have a number of formulations for their foundation. The Intensive is the most coverage formula, so that's probably a good one too to use for concealer. So bear with me here. Almost done, I promise. And while I'm finishing up, I'm just going to tell you my next step is going to be applying just a light dusting of foundation all over. And I get light coverage with my foundation, because I prefer to, I know it's more time consuming, but I prefer to cover up anything I need to cover up separately, like I'm doing right now, and then do a light layer of foundation rather than just do a heavy layer of really good coverage foundation and not have to cover up things separately, because I prefer to have less on my face. And it'll also it'll last, I feel like it lasts longer, and it also feels lighter on your face. So this is my little foundation jar. It's actually from Meow Cosmetics. It's just a big empty jar that I put my foundation in. And this is actually a mixture of Everyday Minerals Golden Fair and a Meow Cosmetics Pampered Foundation Formula. And I will make another video about how I get this foundation mix and what it is that I do. But I'm just going to put some on my brush here. I'm just going to kind of tap it in my lid to get the brush evenly coated so there isn't like a chunk of foundation on it. And I'm just going to lightly blend this all over my face. And if you notice, the brush that I'm using is a fluffy brush. It's not one of those really dense kabuki brushes. And the reason that I'm using this brush is because I'm trying to achieve just a light layer of foundation, just enough to kind of blend my concealer and even out my skin tone just a little bit. And so using a fluffy brush will give you a lighter coverage than using a dense brush, or especially if it's a flat top brush, because they tend to pick up more powder, and so you end up with kind of a heavier application. So I'm done with that now, and what I'm going to do is I still have some foundation in the lid here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this Everyday Minerals Eye Kabuki brush, and I'm just going to get some of that foundation on that brush, and now I'm going to blend it under my under eyes, because remember I put that really light pearly concealer on there, and so I want to just blend that out with my foundation to make sure that it looks natural. So that's that. Now I'm going to use a blush called Pink Snowflakes. It's from Everyday Minerals. Unfortunately, it's discontinued. I know, I'm sorry about that. So I am just going to use, this is my e.l.f. blush brush. I prefer the smaller size. This is definitely on the smaller scale of blush brushes. And I prefer that because it gives me a little bit more control. So just the apple of my cheek, blend it out just a little bit here. Now I'm going to do my other cheek. And sometimes, this is a very light colored blush, but if I'm using a darker blush or a more pigmented blush, and I want to kind of blend it because it might be looking a little bright, or even maybe you can see the edges, I will just take my foundation brush. I might even have some foundation left on it, and I'll just kind of blend over that to make sure that there isn't these kinds of lines where you can see where the blush starts. So that's that for my blush. Oh, and I forgot to mention, if I wanted to use a finishing powder, which I typically do not use, I would use that before the blush. And what I would use is, I don't really need any oil control because that tends to dry me out, but I do really like Everyday Minerals medium bronzer, and I'm actually just going to put a little bit on just to show you. Again, I would have done this before the blush, but just kind of tap it a little bit, and you can see it looks kind of like a scary dark color, but it's actually goes on really, really sheer, as you will see here. See, I'm not really looking much darker. Just for just that hint of color, and it also gives you sun protection as well as an added bonus of this. So I am just going to pause here, and am going to make a part 2 to this video where I move on to my eye makeup. So thank you and stay tuned.